Okay, so enter. By the way, welcome to the RobertForce show. We're talking about the Appalachian Mountain Dulcimer and some of the things that have helped shape the directions that I've gone with this musical instrument, and some of the directions this musical instrument has taken me over the last 35 years. My buddy, the Appalachian Dulcimer, Mountain Dulcimer. So after I hitchhiked back from Berea, Kentucky, I ended up back and re-enrolling in college up at Western Washington University, and in some sense, then was born Dr. Dulcimer. I wanted to know everything there was. I couldn't have been any more serious about this than if I'd been studying anatomy, and I guess in a sense that's what I was doing. I was studying the anatomy of American folk music. To just come falling down in some sense, to come falling down out of being a rock and roll promoter and working with the early groups like the Doors or the Dead or Handy or Country Joe, and to come out of that experience, having had this experience in the Appalachian Mountains and knowing that kind of the wild and crazy stuff I was doing with the Dulcimer was pop. It was like up tempo and then to run into the roots and the graciousness of the mountain culture of the Appalachians and to see the traditional roots of the Dulcimer made me realize that I needed to do what we call, I don't know if we call it anymore, but I call it this. I needed a woodshed. And that meant go out back, sit down in the woodshed, and learn something. Just don't play spontaneously. Now, mind you, it's great to play spontaneous. But you still need to learn form, and form is any part of any kind of artistic endeavor. And you'll start by learning the existing forms. I don't care if you're painting with a brush or you're doing whatever you're doing. Point being is that you learn form. And in this case, sure, I could play a few bluegrass tunes I'd learned from the people who were around me, and I had them show me some things. But I had to start looking at and studying the Appalachian repertoire, things like Go Tell Aunt Rhody or Old Joe Clark or some of the tunes from the English tradition that had come over with the English settlers, tunes like Barbary Ellen, Matty Grove, the list goes on. Point being is that an English tradition with the instrument coming into the Appalachian Mountains, being born more or less most people think between 1860 and 1890. Somehow the first Dulcimer started showing up, and much later in this blog sense, when I'm talking about the history of the instrument as a specific thing, we'll get into some of the theories about how that actually happened. But one thing is unmistakable, and that is the repertoire of the instrument came essentially from the British Isles and settled into the Elizabethan culture of the Appalachian Mountains, and that culture then absorbed it, reformed it, and began writing songs that were indigenous to the culture. An interesting historical footnote is that if you know about your history and the sort of the Reformation, both in music and in art, and the Renaissance that was experienced, the Dulcimer, which is a diatonic instrument, is almost a 200, maybe 250-year throwback to a pre-chromatic time in music. And yet there it was, holding its own and showing back up in the Appalachian Mountains and being played with the fiddles and guitars. But truthfully, most oftentimes, it was a solo instrument, an accompanied instrument, and an instrument that it gave birth to its own repertoire. So I needed a place to play. And I mentioned earlier, it was at that point that I went back and created a coffee house at Mama Sunday's. And in that coffee house, I was able to play, and my apology again, and I'm also sorry for songs like Herring Row and Time Again and all these tunes that I was learning. And my audience thankfully was unsophisticated enough, because as I said earlier, this was a time when people were interested in more about what you were saying rather than how well you said it. You know, right on, brother, right on. Okay, so we know which era we're talking about here. So in the process of having Mama Sundays, I was able to not only play my own little 10 or 15-minute set, but have other people come from the community and begin to play as well. And of course, with an appreciative audience in the college setting, it's like anything went. So you had people who were like banging their guitars and people who had beautiful finger picking. And then eventually we started reaching out and bringing other people. People like Elizabeth Cotton, come play for us, and building them. And then people like Mississippi Fred McDowell, you know, people like Babe Stovall, people who helped form the true roots of American folk music. And talk a little bit more about that in the next episode, because I want to make sure that you're able to download these things without going, oh my gosh, that guy goes on and on and on. So anyway, I'm signing off. This is the Robert Force Show, talking about the Appalachian Dulcimer. Stay tuned.